Michael threw the divorce papers on the table and looked at his 7-month pregnant wife with disgust. "You're not the woman I married," he said coldly before walking out the door to his young girlfriend. Michael stood in the middle of their small, cluttered living room, clutching a set of legal papers like they were a golden ticket to a new life. He didn't look at the crib they had bought together. He didn't look at the ultrasound photos on the fridge. He only looked at Teni, his wife of 2 years, who was currently 7 months pregnant with their first son. "I can't do this anymore, Teni," Michael said, his voice cold and devoid of any emotion. "Look at you. You've let yourself go. You're always tired. You're always complaining, and frankly, you aren't the woman I married." Teni sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling as they rested on her large baby bump. Her face was swollen from the pregnancy, and her hair, which used to be thick and lustrous, was thinning at the temples due to the extreme stress of her high-risk pregnancy. She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes, trying to find a spark of the man who had promised to love her in sickness and in health. "Michael, I am carrying our child," she whispered. "The doctor said I need rest. I'm doing this for us." "There is no us anymore," Michael snapped. He tossed the divorce papers on the coffee table, right next to a crumpled piece of yellow paper Teni had brought home from the grocery store an hour earlier. "I found someone who actually takes care of herself. Someone who makes me feel alive. I want you out by the weekend." Michael walked out and slammed the door, heading straight to the arms of his 22-year-old girlfriend, Chioma. He didn't notice that the crumpled yellow paper on the table was a lottery ticket, and he certainly didn't know that Teni had a potential of winning $50 million. But as the door echoed with the sound of his departure, Teni didn't scream. She collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach in sudden, sharp pain. Before we continue, hit the like and subscribe button. And where are you watching from? Is it Kenya, United States, Canada? Comment down below. To understand how a man could be so heartless, we have to look back at whom Michael and Teni were before the shadows moved in. Michael was an average salary earner at a mid-sized logistics company. He was a man who cared deeply about appearances. He loved having a trophy on his arm. When he first met Teni, she was a rising star in a marketing firm, vibrant, fit, and always dressed in the latest fashions. Michael felt like a king when they walked into a room together. Teni, on the other hand, was a woman of substance. She was kind, hardworking, and believed in the power of empathy. She fell in love with Michael because she thought he was a dreamer like her. When they got married, she used her savings to help pay off his debts, believing that a marriage was a partnership where you lift each other up. For the first year, things were fine. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable. However, everything changed the moment Teni got pregnant. Pregnancy affects every woman differently. For Teni, it was a physical battleground. By the second trimester, she developed a condition that caused her face to swell significantly, what some people unkindly call pregnancy nose. She gained weight rapidly due to water retention, and the hormonal shifts caused patches of her hair to fall out. She was exhausted. She was nauseous. She was carrying a life. Instead of being a supportive husband, Michael became disgusted. He started staying late at work, or so he said. In reality, he was spending his meager paycheck at expensive fast food restaurants with Chioma. Chioma was 23, ambitious in all the wrong ways, and looked like a fitness model. She knew Michael was married. She knew his wife was pregnant. She didn't care. To her, Michael was a project, someone she could manipulate into spending what little money he had on her. One Tuesday evening, Teni sat at the kitchen table, looking at their mounting bills. "Michael," she said softly as he walked in, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. "The doctor says I need to start taking these specific prenatal vitamins. They are a bit expensive, and we need to save for the delivery. Can you give me some money for the pharmacy?" Michael rolled his eyes, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. "I told you, Teni, the company is cutting bonuses. I'm broke. Maybe if you didn't eat so much, we'd have more money." Teni winced. "I hardly eat, Michael. It's the baby." "Whatever," he muttered, grabbing his keys. "I'm going out to meet a client." That client was Chioma. That same night, Michael took Chioma to a fancy bistro. When Chioma pointed at a designer dress in a shop window on the way back, Michael didn't hesitate. He swiped his credit card, spending $300 on a dress for his mistress, the exact amount Teni needed for her medical supplies and the baby's first clothes. Teni wasn't stupid. She saw the receipts in his pockets. She saw the photos on social media that his friends accidentally showed her. But she stayed quiet, hoping that once the baby arrived, Michael's heart would melt. She focused on her small side business, selling handmade organic skincare products online, to keep her mind busy. On a rainy Monday, feeling particularly low and physically drained, Teni stopped at a gas station to buy a bottle of water. On a whim, she spent her last $2 on a Powerball ticket. She wasn't a gambler, but she whispered a prayer. Please, let me provide a good life for my son, with or without his father. She went home, tucked the ticket into her purse, and prepared a nice dinner for Michael, hoping for a peaceful night. Instead, Michael walked in with a suitcase and a lawyer's business card. After Michael threw the papers down and insulted her appearance for the last time, he left the house. He took his remaining savings, moved into a small apartment with Chioma, and blocked Teni's number. He wanted a fresh start without the burden of a sick wife and a crying infant. Teni lay on the floor for a long time, the physical pain in her stomach eventually subsiding into a dull ache. She looked at the divorce papers. Then, she looked at the crumpled lottery ticket. She crawled to the TV and turned on the news to see the winning numbers. She looked at her ticket. Her eyes blurred. She looked again. She didn't scream. She didn't jump. She simply sat back against the sofa and took a deep breath. She was no longer a burden. She was the wealthiest woman in the city. But her joy was short-lived. A sudden, sharp contraction racked her body. She was only 30 weeks along. She reached for her phone to call Michael, to tell him she was in labor, to give him one last chance to be a father. He declined the call and sent a text. Stop calling me. Talk to my lawyer. I'm busy. Teni dropped the phone. She realized then that money couldn't buy her a husband, but it could buy her a future. She dialed 911 herself. As the paramedics wheeled her out of the house she was about to be evicted from, Teni clutched the lottery ticket in one hand and her stomach in the other. Please, she prayed, just let my baby be okay. The doors of the ambulance slammed shut. At that exact moment, miles away, Michael was raising a glass of cheap champagne with Chioma, celebrating his freedom. He had no idea that he had just walked away from $50 million and a son who would soon become the center of a very different world. But as the ambulance raced toward the hospital, the monitors began to beep frantically. Teni's heart rate was dropping. The stress of Michael's betrayal, the physical toll of the pregnancy, and the sudden shock of the lottery win had pushed her body to the breaking point. She's crashing, the paramedic yelled. We need to get this baby out now. As they rushed her into the emergency room, Teni caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass doors. She saw the swollen nose Michael mocked, the thinning hair, and the exhaustion. But she also saw something else, a flicker of fire in her eyes. She wasn't ready to die. She had $50 million reasons to live, and one tiny heartbeat inside her that depended on her strength. The doctors performed an emergency C-section. For a moment, the room went silent. Then a thin, sharp cry broke the air. It's a boy, the nurse whispered, placing the tiny, premature infant near Teni's face. He was small, but he was a fighter. Teni reached out a trembling hand. His name is Toby, she breathed. Just as she touched his tiny hand, the heart monitor flatlined. The long, high-pitched beep filled the room. The doctors scrambled, shouting orders, charging the paddles. Teni's world went black. She's dead, the doctor said. In just about 30 seconds, miraculously, Teni's heart started again. It was as if her soul refused to leave her son alone in a world with a father like Michael. Teni stayed in a private wing of the hospital, using a small portion of her winnings to ensure Toby had the best neonatal care. She kept her wealth a secret from everyone except her lawyer. A month later her body began to change. Without the stress of Michael's constant verbal abuse, the swelling in her face subsided. With proper nutrition and the best medical treatments money could buy, her hair began to grow back thicker than ever. She wasn't just recovering, she was transforming. While Teni was learning to walk again and bonding with baby Toby, Michael was living a very different reality. He had moved into a flashy apartment with Chioma. To keep her happy, he was spending money he didn't have. He took out payday loans to buy her designer bags and took her to an expensive restaurant that cost more than a home-cooked meal for a week. Babe, I need a new car, Chioma said one morning, pouting as she looked at Michael's aging sedan. "This one smells like married people." Michael laughed nervously. "Soon, Chioma. I'm up for a big promotion at the logistics firm. My boss loves me." But Michael was distracted. He was constantly checking his phone, hoping for a message from Teni. Not because he missed her, but because he wanted to gloat. He wanted her to beg him to come back, so he could say no. When he heard nothing, he assumed she was struggling, broke, and miserable. It made him feel powerful. Teni, however, was far from miserable. She didn't buy a mansion or a fleet of cars. She hired a team of financial advisors. She bought stocks in sustainable energy and invested heavily in her own skincare line, T-Glow. She bought a modest but high-security penthouse and hired a nanny who became like a sister to her. She learned a valuable lesson. Money is a tool, but character is the foundation. She spent her days studying business and her nights cradling Toby. One afternoon, her lawyer, Mr. Abbas, sat across from her. "Teni, the divorce is final." Michael signed everything without even reading the financial disclosure. He was too busy trying to impress his girlfriend. "He waived all rights to your assets, thinking you had none." Teni smiled. It was a sad smile, but a firm one. He didn't want the burden. Now, he doesn't get the blessing. A year passed. Teni was now a stunning, confident CEO. Toby was a healthy, laughing toddler who looked exactly like Michael, but with Teni's kind eyes. Meanwhile, Michael's life began to crumble. The big promotion he expected never came. Instead, because he was so focused on Chioma and his social life, he made a massive mistake on a shipping manifest that cost the company thousands of dollars. His boss called him into the office. "Michael, you've been distracted and your work has suffered. We aren't promoting you. We're demoting you to the warehouse. Your salary is being cut by 40%. Michael walked out of the office in a daze. When he got home and told Chioma, she didn't offer him a hug. She didn't offer empathy. Demoted. Chioma hissed, packing her bags. "I didn't sign up for a warehouse worker, Michael. I'm 24. I need to live life to the fullest." By sunset, Chioma was gone, taking the jewelry and the expensive clothes Michael had gone into debt to buy her. Michael sat in his empty, expensive apartment, realizing he had traded his family for a shadow. Months later, a broken Michael was working late shifts, moving crates in the cold warehouse. He heard his co-workers talking about a massive charity gala happening downtown. "The CEO of T-Glow is donating $5 million to the Children's Hospital," one worker said. "They say she's the youngest billionaire in the city. And man, is she beautiful." Michael felt a sting of jealousy. He decided to go to the gala venue, hoping to wait outside and maybe network with some rich businessmen to get his life back on track. He stood by the red carpet in his dusty work jacket, feeling invisible. A sleek, black limousine pulled up. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She wore a dress that looked like it was made of liquid gold. Her hair was a crown of curls. She looked like a queen. Michael's heart stopped. He recognized those eyes. "Teni," he whispered, loud enough for her to hear. Teni stopped. She looked at the man standing behind the security rope, the man who had left her while she was pregnant, the man who called her ugly and a burden. She looked at his dirty jacket and his hollow cheeks. Then, a little boy climbed out of the car behind her, dressed in a tiny tuxedo. He looked exactly like a mini version of Michael. "Daddy?" the little boy asked, looking at Michael with confusion. Teni looked Michael straight in the eye, her expression calm and cold. "No, Toby," Teni said firmly. "That's just a stranger who works for us. Let's go inside." Michael tried to jump the rope to reach them, but two massive security guards grabbed him. As he struggled, Teni's lawyer stepped forward and handed Michael a single piece of paper. "What is this?" Michael yelled. "That," the lawyer replied, "is the bill for the child support you haven't paid in 2 years. And a restraining order." The restraining order hadn't just kept Michael away. It had fueled a toxic, simmering resentment. In his mind, that $50 million wasn't Teni's. It was his lost lottery ticket. Working the graveyard shift at the warehouse, smelling of stale grease and regret, Michael watched Teni's face on every newsstand. She was the golden matriarch. He was a stranger who works for us. Desperation is a dangerous motivator. Using the last of his payday loans, Michael bought a beat-up van and a burner phone. He knew the schedule of the elite preschool Toby attended. He knew the security was tight, But he also knew the one thing the guards didn't. He was the biological father, with a fake ID and a practiced, tearful story about a family emergency. Michael bypassed a distracted substitute receptionist. Within minutes, he had whisked 2-year-old Toby into the back of the van. Teni was in the middle of a board meeting for Glow when her private line buzzed. "I have the boy," a distorted voice hissed. "I want $30 million. If I see a single siren, the blessing you're so proud of disappears. Drop-off is at the old tunnel at midnight. Come alone." Teni didn't scream. She didn't faint. The woman who had survived a flatline on a C-section table was gone, replaced by a lioness. She hung up and immediately dialed a number. The elite private security firm. "He has my son," she said, her voice like shards of ice. "I want the police involved, but they stay 2 miles back. I'll go in alone first." The old tunnel was lonely. He stood in the shadows, clutching Toby's hand. The boy was silent, terrified by the stranger, who claimed to be his father but smelled of cigarettes and panic. A pair of headlights cut through the fog. Teni's sleek SUV pulled up. She stepped out, holding a heavy designer duffel bag. She looked vulnerable, standing alone in the wind, her silk coat fluttering. "I'm here, Michael," she called out. She didn't use the stranger label now. She used his name like a curse. "I know it's you. Give me my son." Michael stepped into the light, his face gaunt. "You think you're so much better than me? You're only here because of a lucky piece of paper. That money should have been ours." "There was never an ours, Michael. You made sure that the night you threw those papers on the coffee table," Teni said, stepping closer. "The money is in the bag. Take it and let him go." Michael lunged for the bag, his greed overriding his caution. As his fingers gripped the leather handle, he felt a strange weight. It wasn't cash. It was a GPS-weighted tracking brick. At that exact moment, 3 officers came out pointing guns at him and proceeded to handcuff him. Teni didn't back away. She reached out and snatched Toby from Michael's frozen grip. "You told me not to bring the police," Teni whispered, her face inches from his. "But I stopped listening to you years ago." As the handcuffs clicked around Michael's wrists, the head officer stepped forward. "Michael Waju, you're under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, and violation of a restraining order. You're going to prison for a long time." Michael looked at the duffel bag, now lying open to reveal nothing but old magazines and a GPS tracker. He looked at Teni, who was holding Toby, so tightly it seemed they were one person again. "You're a monster," Michael spat, tears of rage blurring his vision. Teni didn't look back as she walked toward her SUV. "No, Michael. I'm a mother, and I have the resources to make sure you never see the sun, let alone my son, ever again." The police cars drove Michael away, their sirens fading into the quiet night. Inside the back of the SUV, Teni held Toby close. The little boy had fallen asleep, finally feeling safe in his mother's arms. Teni looked out the window and felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. Michael's life in prison was exactly what he deserved. Because he kidnapped a child and broke the law many times, the judge sentenced him to 20 years in a high-security prison. He still owed over $80,000 in unpaid child support. Since he had no money, the court took the small amount of pay he earned from prison chores to slowly pay it back. Chioma never visited him. His old friends forgot his name. He spent his days in a small, gray cell, thinking about the $50 million and the family he threw away for nothing. Teni didn't let the scary night at the old tunnel break her. She bought a beautiful house by the sea with big windows and a huge garden for Toby to play in. Her skincare company, Glow, became a global success. One evening, a few years later, Teni stood on her balcony watching Toby run through the grass. He was healthy, happy, and loved. She realized that the lottery ticket was a blessing, but her true strength came from her own heart. She had turned her pain into power. Michael was now just a ghost from her past, and he could never hurt them again. Teni smiled, took a deep breath of the fresh air, and went to play with her son. They were finally free.